Okay. Right. So, yeah, we have pioneers of regional planning. As you can see, we have Sir Patrick Geddes is the father of regional planning, Louis Mumford, Sir Leslie Patrick Abercrombie, Walter Isard, Clarence Stein, Benton McKay. But of course, yeah, we have more people to be added here and among the pioneers of regional planning. So that we will discuss in the coming slides. So Jen, if you could move toward on that particular movement. So we have one, two, three, four, so like eight highlights here. So we can start with these are the early influences and the in general. So this is the history of regional planning movement. So for each contribution, yeah, we call it a movement. So early influences from the Garden City movement in the UK and New Towns movement in the US. So it's um these are two different types of movement, but we try to distinguish and we try to understand how they have contributed to the regional planning as a strategy, as a theory also. So for Garden City movement, it was spearheaded by Ebenezer Howard. Okay, so if you can see how he looks like, and Ebenezer Howard, I think he's not in the picture, right? So Ebenezer Howard, it's his he had spearheaded Garden City movement in the late 19th century, and this concept emphasized the creation of self-contained communities surrounded by green belts. So I hope you will remember this one. These green belts try to balance urban and rural environments. And these garden cities were designed to combine the benefits of both town and country life, including housing, jobs, and recreation within close proximity. On the other hand, we have the new towns movements. So this is the one that existed in the US, and it was actually influenced by the Garden City ideas. Okay, so this movement in the US during the 20th century focus on establishing planned urban communities to manage rapid urban growth and provide better living environments. So it's sought to create more balanced developments that provided housing, industry, and green spaces. So number two there, the number of US cities with municipal planning commissions. So remember, the establishment of municipal planning commissions grew from 100 to 500 between 1920 and 1930. So there was a boom in the early 20th century in municipal planning commissions. In the US. So a city sought to manage urban growth, traffic, and land use more effectively. So these commissions played a key role in formalizing urban planning processes and making informed decisions about zoning, infrastructure, and land development. And the third highlight there is Regional Planning Association of America. It was founded in 1923 to 2025 to 1925. Um, so it published survey. Okay, what's the survey all about? It was the RPAA published the survey, which was a manifesto advocating for the concept of regionalism in planning. It argued that cities were part of the part of broader regions and needed to plan accordingly to integrate urban, suburban, and rural areas. Also in this context, yeah, the RPAA brought together a variety of professionals. They are architects, engineers, surveyors, artists, sociologists, and many more, even lawyers, but they were associate members only during the time. So reflecting now a unique interdisciplinary approach that address the complexity of planning beyond just physical development. So, the RPAA also promoted regional planning as a holistic approach, recognizing that the issues of cities often extended beyond municipal borders and required regional solutions. Okay, so I hope you understand them in the manner that uh you can imagine that in history. Okay, so Town and Country Planning Act of 1947 in the UK. This piece of legislation in the UK marked a significant turning point for urban and regional planning. The act focused on spatial impacts, dealing with how various policies affected land use, housing, transportation, and the economy. It also sought to coordinate efforts across different areas to ensure comprehensive planning. Then also the method of planning dealt with or established by this act was in the concept that man should control physical and human environments to meet societal needs. It introduced the idea of systematic long-term planning, where governments took an active role in shaping the physical layout of regions to meet defined needs such as housing, industry, and environmental preservation. So the history of regional planning has been shaped by innovative movements from the UK and the US with a focus on addressing the complexities of modern urbanization, from the Garden City movement to the creation of municipal planning commissions and later the RPAA and Town and Country Planning Acts. So regional planning evolved into a structured and interdisciplinary approach to tackling urban challenges and aiming for a more holistic integration of cities within or with their surrounding regions. And we can continue. We have number 5 in the next slide, actually, that is specific of Benton McKay. He published the book, The New Exploration, which is a philosophy of regional planning in 1928. I hope you will remember that in your during your when you take your board exam that Benton McKay was an American forester. He was a conservationist and planner, introduced his ideas of regional planning through his 1928 publication, which aimed to integrate environmental and human needs. He was also known for conceptualizing the Appalachian Trail, demonstrating the relationship between recreation, conservation, and regional planning. McKay's philosophy laid the groundwork for future regional planning, where environmental sustainability was intertwined with human development. In number 6, Thomas Adams and Louis Mumford debated the multi-volume regional plan of New York from 1928 to 1932. The regional plan of New York and its environs was a multi-volume set of documents focusing on the planning of New York City and its surrounding areas. Thomas Adams a British planner, was instrumental in this effort, which provided comprehensive analysis and forward-looking ideas for managing the rapid urban growth and sprawl around the city. Louis Mumford, a key figure in regional planning and architecture criticism, contributed extensively to the intellectual discourse of this period. He advocated for integrating social, environmental, and economic aspects in the regional planning framework. Their debates and contributions helped shape regional planning as a multifaceted discipline, influencing how regions should grow in harmony with their surroundings. Number 7 is regional planning on counties, river basins, valleys, dams, rangeland, and ancestral land. Over time, regional planning moved beyond urban centers to address natural features and infrastructural needs. So you can see here Los Angeles County in 1922, early regional planning efforts sought to manage the sprawling Los Angeles area. Appalachian Trail in 1928, conceived by McKay. This trail represented a significant step toward integrating conservation with regional planning. Then Tennessee Valley Authority in 1933, one of the most famous examples of regional planning. This New Deal project aimed at managing natural resources and improving economic conditions through electrification and flood control. Then the Grand Coulee Dam in 1935 there, and Hoover Dam 1936. These are large-scale infrastructure projects that considered not just local impacts, but broader regional effects on water management and energy generation. St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959 and Delaware River 1961. These are major, it involved major river management and transportation infrastructure that required coordination across multiple jurisdictions and regions. And for Miami, Ohio Valley in 1970, during this time, regional planning efforts in both areas or efforts in Miami, for example, Miami Valley region, focus on managing growth while maintaining environmental and historical considerations. For number 8, regional planning easily dovetailed with transportation planning. Penn, Jersey in 1954, Chicago, Detroit in 1954. Transportation planning became a natural extension of regional planning as cities and regions realized the need for efficient infrastructure to connect sprawling urban and rural areas. Actually, if you look at, if you've seen online some exercises on the AICP, means the American Institute of Certified Planners. So these are good exercises that past what's this? A PRB or professional regulatory board members have sought as references for creating or for formulating board exam questions. So it's a good actually it forms part of my strategies. I use AICP questions to explain some theories, especially theories and history. So you would normally find Penn Jersey. It may not be very familiar among Filipino planners, but we really need to also become familiar because they form part of the highlights of regional planning, the history of regional planning, like Penn Jersey, 1954. So it's a plan. It's actually the coordination between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So that aim to create more efficient transportation link across state borders, helping support economic growth and reduce congestion. So there are AICP questions that pointed out to Penn Jersey coordination. So also Chicago, Detroit in 1954 as one of the major transportation corridors in the US. So the Chicago-Detroit region required careful planning during the time to address the needs of industrial transport and commuter travel. So these initiatives showcased how regional planning could seamlessly integrate transportation needs, ensuring that infrastructure supported not only local urban needs, but also broader regional goals and economic growth and connectivity. So we cannot complain about all these things that we need to study because it's Philippine planning is mostly US and UK planning. So um I know that in BS architecture uh mm, you are already I think so that you came across all these things in your curriculum. So I think it's in terms of history and theory, architecture field has an advantage. So you can leverage all your how do you call this one? Stock knowledge about history and theory. So all right. Um what's regional planning in the next slide? So okay. Regional planning, it's a lot here. So regional planning focuses on planning for a sub-national territory, okay? So even in Philippines, right? We have the regions. It's called a sub-national territory, and it's not a local government because it's a sub-national level. It has distinct scale. We're referring to the size, and extent, we're referring to the scope. Typically, this area is contiguous, meaning it's geographically continuous and the parts within it share common or complementary characteristics. These regions are often linked through intensive interaction or flows, such as the movement of goods, people, or information. A key feature of a region is its distinctive economic and social characteristics that differentiate it from neighboring areas. So regions often exhibit continuities and discontinuities, meaning that while certain aspects might remain stable, others might change or fluctuate. This area these areas also face specific opportunities and problems related to their geographic, economic, or social context. Notably, a region might not have clearly defined administrative boundaries. Instead, it could be delineated by functional, economic, or cultural criteria rather than political or administrative lines. At the intermediate level, all right, so regional planning sits between national and local, or what we call sometimes grassroots. So uh, grassroots planning levels. It plays a role in bridging the gap between high level national policies and local ground level actions. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is you are bridging between the national level of policies of PPAs, and the local level, which we call the grassroots or the ground level actions. As to the urban and rural components, a region is not limited indeed to cities or urban areas alone. Instead, it's an extended urban space that often includes both urban and rural components working together in an integrated way. Okay, so we can continue to the next slide because we're still clarifying what's regional planning. So, this aspect of the physical aspect, I mean, because that's the one that you're seeing now on your slide. This aspect refers to the physical structure and layout of the region. It involves careful planning around land use, infra, and communication systems, among others. And there are many things around this, like we have the roads, we have the highways, and public transport. Other aspects include utility management, okay, such as water supply, waste management systems, etc. So the physical dimension also accounts for spatial planning, the space, ensuring that settlements and development are efficiently distributed. Historically, this aspect of regional planning has its roots in the direct control of town and planning, where the centralization policies and regulatory frameworks for urban growth originated. So we need really to emphasize on the physical aspect. Next is economic, right? Economic aspect, that the economic dimension of regional planning addresses the economic structure and overall prosperity of the area. So the focus here is on ensuring that the region's economy is thriving and capable of attracting investments, jobs, industries, etc. So it also addresses questions like what? How can we enhance economic efficiency? Another question is, where should we establish growth poles? What are growth poles? And regions designed for economic development. So questions as to what mechanisms do we need to reduce regional disparities and ensure convergence, because that's the role of the region, to bridge some gaps, or to make sure that disparities are being addressed. And of course, convergence approaches are being used or being leveraged to make sure regional development or regional planning is done at an appropriately. So the economic dimension often operates through market mechanisms to promote business growth, enhance competitiveness, and sustain regional economic health. So within regional planning, important discussions are, important discussions surround growth poles, industrial zones, and specific economic zones. These are all essential to understanding how to build economically sustainable regions. So a central theme here is the balance between development and equity, ensuring that investments flow into all regions fairly to prevent further disparity. So that's the main goal. And then we have social aspects. The social aspect of regional planning concerns the migration of people, issues of equity, and redistribution of resources. Remember that? Migration of people, issues of equity, and redistribution of resources. So which questions are supposed to be addressed by the social aspect? Like, how do we plan for population growth or decline? How do we ensure that access to social services, healthcare, and education is equitable distributed across regions? So social planning also deals with issues like housing, urban poverty, and inequality, and many more. As populations migrate due to job opportunities, like from rural to urban, quality of life, environmental factors, planners must be equipped to deal with changing demographics and ensure adequate support systems for affected communities. Social integration also involves planning for diversity, ensuring that all groups feel represented and included in development efforts, like who are our marginalized communities. We have the indigenous peoples, women, and those who we have identified in our plans or as identified within in the context of the SDGs. So we need to do all these things. You need to think all of this. So indeed, 1 year is just enough for you to prepare for your board exam, because um at least for the bar or for the medical field, they have specific there's direction and there's prediction about how which questions would be asked. But for environmental planning, it's something like suntok sa buwan. So if you know that, right? It's something that you don't know what are inside their minds for the 2025 exam. So that's why we need to be very serious in in this particular in this class, because I know and I'm quite sure that you did not cover all these things in your master's program. So I need to proceed with the cultural aspect. Cultural the cultural aspect considers the role of ethnic identity, heritage, and shared history in shaping a region. Regions with strong cultural identities often face different challenges from those that are more diverse. So probably questions like how can cultural diversity be embraced within regional planning, and how do we plan for both homogeneous and heterogeneous populations? So recognizing that different regions have varied cultural needs and historical context helps create solutions that respect local traditions while promoting inclusive development. So in more heterogeneous regions, cultural preservation can involve protecting indigenous rights or ensuring that development does not erode a region's cultural heritage. Then, environmental aspect. This dimension of regional planning focuses on the sustainability and connectedness of ecosystems. This means incorporating ecological factors into planning processes to promote a balanced and sustainable approach to development. So, um, planners must be mindful of how urbanization impacts natural landscapes, biodiversity, and resources like water, air, and soil. Also, environmental planning ensures that sustainability and resilience are built into all aspects of regional planning by considering issues like how do we minimize environmental degradation while fostering growth? How can we integrate ecosystem-based management and sustainable land use policies, and many more, many questions. This aspect also includes considerations for climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies, ensuring that future developments are designed with long-term environmental impacts in mind. So we can go to the focus. The next slide is focus on of regional planning. So I hope you have already you had a good grasp already after saying all those things. That so therefore, so which parts or which aspects of regional planning should we focus on? Regional planning emphasizes addressing broader geographic challenges and opportunities, ensuring that balanced growth and development of different areas within a region. So do we put focus of? Like number one, decentralization policies. So what are these? Decentralization policies are central to regional planning as they transfer powers from central governments to regional or local governments. So the aim here is to empower local governments, making them more responsive to the unique needs of their regions. Another aim is to encourage more efficient governance by allowing decisions to be made closer to the population affected by those decisions. So decentralization can address over-concentration of resources in urban centers, allowing rural or less developed regions to have more autonomy in shaping their development. Another focus is distribution of population. So how do we understand this? Population distribution is a significant concern in regional planning. It involves managing how populations are spread across urban, suburban, and rural areas. We also need to address issues like overcrowding in urban centers and underpopulation in rural areas. So in some cases, this may involve creating new urban centers or promoting the development of smaller towns to reduce pressure on larger cities. Then the third one is reduction of economic disparities among regions versus economic polarization. These are two distinct strategies or tasks of planners. A key goal of regional planning is to reduce economic disparities between regions. I mentioned this earlier. While some regions may experience rapid development and wealth creation, others may lag behind. This leads to economic polarization where wealth and opportunities are concentrated in certain areas, often at the expense of others. So regional planning seeks to redistribute wealth and resources, ensuring that all regions have access to the infrastructure, to investment, and opportunities they need to thrive. Also, regional planning seeks to promote regional convergence. Remember the two? Okay. Redistribution and convergence. What do we mean by regional convergence? Meaning that less developed regions should catch up with advanced more advanced ones in terms of income, employment, and opportunities. Then we have also interregional allocation or redistribution of resources. So this is quite easy because this is about regional convergence, that this involves the equitable allocation of resources across different regions, ensuring that no area is left behind, just like SDGs. So what's the main goal, the main mission there? Until 2030, that make sure that no one is left behind. That's true. That's also true for regional planning, that we ensure that no area is left behind. And so this this code is not really very new, that when you saw them, or when you saw this on SDGs and drum beating on no one should be left behind. It's been there. It's been there in history that no area should be left behind. The idea of regional convergence is about balancing development so that no region remains significantly more developed than another. But is this happening? For instance, policies might direct funding, infrastructure projects, and services to less developed areas, fostering more balanced regional growth. And we know it's most, if not all, nations are very political. So even distribution of funding projects, it's something that's political most of the time, if not all the time. So number 5, institutional capacitation. So what do we mean by this? It's all about reorganization of local governments and other structural reforms. Regional planning often calls for the reorganization and strengthening of local institutions. This is about giving local governments and institutions the skills, resources, and capabilities they need to govern effectively. So institutional capacitation involves training local government officials to ensure they can manage development projects efficiently. Another task under institutional capacitation, it involves streamlining local government structures to ensure they're equipped to handle regional challenges, especially those that span across political boundaries. So, and so forth and so on. But there's more, right? Managing urban congestion. Okay, you can see that at the last bullet, one of the pressing challenges in regional planning is urban congestion. As cities grow, the strain on infrastructure, housing, and services becomes more pronounced. So urban congestion can lead to environmental degradation. Urban congestion can lead to increased commuting times and overburdened public services. To counter this, regional planning promotes a cross-cutting approach where cities are treated in relation to their surrounding environment. So in this model, cities and towns are not isolated entities, but part of a larger interconnected regional system. This approach promotes more sustainable urban growth by spreading development across a wider geographic area. So that's actually a shifting towards a region-centric approach if you come to think about that. The traditional categories of urban, suburban, and rural planning are often insufficient to address modern development challenges. So the regional approach offers a more comprehensive strategy that treats cities and towns as part of a broader ecosystem, including ecological balance and resource renewal. So in this particular strategy or model, if you consider that regional planning is a model, then cities become subordinate to the region, with older cities and newly developed towns functioning together as parts of a larger interconnected whole. So regions are treated as more than just a collection of localities. They are seen as dynamic spaces that drive economic, social, and environmental sustainability. So maybe we can go to the next slide so that 1, 2, 3. Okay. Maybe we can end here on the last slide because I'm ready to start with Clarenstein, and then but I know you will be overburdened by this because we might reach until 12 midnight to be so for me to discuss comprehensively. So regional divergence, all right. Okay, we go to regional divergence. Um Regional divergence means that regions are inherently unequal in this particular context, because regional divergence refers to the growing inequalities between regions over time. These imbalances in development arise from several factors that often reinforce each other, leading to the unequal distribution of wealth, resources, and opportunities across regions. So we need to understand this one. What are the causes of regional imbalance? So we start with geography and natural endowments. It says here, uneven distribution of harbors, minerals, raw materials contributes to regional imbalances. So regions with rich natural resources, for example, coastal areas with natural ports or mineral-rich regions, tend to develop faster due to their comparative advantage in trade, industry, and resource extraction. Conversely, regions with fewer natural resources may struggle to keep up, lacking the raw materials needed to spur growth. So, for historical factors, there's the second bullet, colonization and colonization and invasion. They have long-term impacts on regional inequality. Historical processes like colonization often lead to development of specific regions over others, with colonial powers focusing their infrastructure and investment on areas that were strategically or economically important to them. So these imbalances persisted post-colonialism, as some regions had developed the institutions and infrastructure needed for sustained growth, while others were left behind. And the third, economic, political, technological, and social factors. Okay. Regions that experience political instability or poor governance tend to lag behind economically. And then another one, and on technological advancement. So it's often concentrated in specific regions, especially in urban centers, leading to disparities in productivity and innovation. Then social and demographic conditions, such as population growth rates, education levels, and access to healthcare, can significantly affect the economic performance of a region. So this yeah, I'm trying to guide you as to why regions are inherently unequal because of these factors, and for combination of factors there, which means external and internal. Often, regional divergence is the result of external factors in the early stage of development or early stages of development, such as colonization or geography, and later driven by internal factors, including governance, institutional capacities, and local policies. So this combination makes it harder for lagging regions to catch up without significant interventions. So what's the role of the state there? Because it says state policies and interventions have to temper, if not rectify, regional divergence rather than intensify it. So it it means that state policies play a critical role in either mitigating or exacerbating regional inequalities. So intervention is required to redistribute resources and promote balanced regional development. This can involve investing in lagging regions through infrastructure, education, and technology transfer. And then this can also involve incentives for businesses, like what we do have in modern times, that in our existing structure or strategy these days, we have the PEZA, we have the TIEZA, incentivizing the locators. So it means that active intervention can involve incentives for businesses to set up operations in less developed areas, spreading economic activity. So policies should be designed to temper regional divergence by promoting equal opportunities across regions. The goal of state intervention should be to rectify regional divergence, ensuring that underdeveloped regions are not left behind in the process of national development. Without intervention, um, according to this concept, regional imbalances could intensify, leading to further polarization and social unrest. So, addressing regional divergence requires an understanding of the unique challenges and opportunities facing each region. So, I think we can end here because I need to cut it here so that I can start with Clarence time tomorrow, especially so that we are just 12 here, so minus 2, 10. So it means that many are called, but few are chosen. So I will remember the 10 people tonight who have been working so hard. But I'm not saying others are not working so hard, but sometimes you get very lucky when you hear it straight from the horse mouth, right? Is that correct, Rodante? So, okay, Jen, I think we can end it here.